Hello guys, another update for Optic. This one is slightly delayed. We pushed the update already a few days ago, but still excited to share all the new stuff that's coming with this update. One big aspect of this update is the product design update and just improving the general aesthetic of the base model. First, before we go to the tool, the gallery got a new refresh of new stuff. So there's a lot of stuff from, for example, Prompt AI. He's been doing a ton of stuff on Optic and always cool to follow what he's doing next. So a lot of these examples are from Prompt AI. I also added, with the new product design update, I added some examples here. There's a bunch of cars, but then there's some product design examples as well. Before I show kind of the improvements in product design, I also want to give a shout out to Mr. Simonson on Instagram. He's been doing a lot of stuff on Optic, really cool, and fine-tuning it for exactly what he wants to generate, which also then helps to kind of alleviate the default Optic style and like really push for the intention that you want. And I think he has some pretty cool examples of like what does he want to create and showing. And so he also has a page specifically for kind of the AI creations. So you should go check him out on both of his Instagram profiles. Then we can jump into the update itself and kind of showing us some examples from the fine tuning we did. So I'll just scroll through some examples. For example, with the chair here, that's the like post training. So that's with the fine tune. And this is before the fine tune, which from a design point of view, it's kind of lacking. So with the fine tune, we're trying to kind of teach it more on just general aesthetic for design. Even landscapes, it seems to do better. So this is not really part of the tuning, but I think learning the design aesthetic, it seems to improve even general like portrait or landscape pictures. So that's the original before the training, and that's after. And it has a bit more harmony to the image and a bit more like photorealism, I guess. Here, a little phone example, like a smartphone ad. So that's before training, very literal way of showing it, versus here is post-training and much more like aesthetic, more of what we as designers would want to have. Even patterns and graphics are improved. I will show even like posters in a second, but just getting an improved aesthetic for whether it's graphics or product design. That was really our focus for this update. Here, a little shoe concept. Before training, it looks something like this. Again, it looks very photorealistic, but it's very normal looking shoe. And so being able to do something more creative. And this is very conceptual shoe, but that's what we want. We want to make sure that the user is able to push for something new and discover new ideas with the tool. Graphic design is better. It wasn't really a focus on it, but again, same with the landscape. It just seems to do better overall in categories that we didn't really focus on. That's another smartphone example. Again, before it's very literal, but now we can get some like creative aspect to the generations. Some interior, very minimalistic in this case. Something like coffee packaging or something. Just a simple bike. And we added a slider where you can actually define how conceptual it is. So I will show in the tool, but you'll be able to like define, like go more conceptual, like don't be so like production bike or production car. You can now have a slider where you can actually push the value up to do something more conceptual, or vice versa. If you have, let's say, a vintage car and you want to make sure it stays vintage, you can then tone down that slider. Graphics again got better, and even abstract graphics. This liquid art example I think was pretty cool. Product design is much better. So not just the understanding of aesthetic for product design, but also composition of product design pictures. That was a really important aspect of the update and the fine tuning we're doing. Again, I liked with the smartphones because it's a nice blend of like something creative seen with something productive. Bikes, again, here it's a bit more conceptual than the earlier bike example you saw. And all of these examples you see are directly from the model. I haven't done any Photoshop on them. That's why you see like some of the text might look funny. A little bike example, and actually that's the original. You can see it's very, very old looking. It looks like a scooter, but actually the prompt even was a electric scooter. And this, I mean, could be an electric scooter, but at least aesthetic wise, it's very traditional. So that's after the training. Again, just bringing better composition, better design understanding, and more creative output. Like before, it's very literal in categories that we hadn't focused on, except cars, because obviously we had done a lot of work on cars. But now we are doing more and more work on stuff that's outside of cars. So, for example, scooters, product design. And we already started to bleed into categories that we haven't even focused on, like just the general aesthetic of a landscape or something. This is a bike example, an electric bike. Here's another example of something that wasn't the focus of our training, but just to give you a sense of what does it look like on categories outside of just product design. Here, more liquid art or abstract art. I think this was pretty cool. Here, an example where the prompt was something like a pillow turned into a backpack or something, just like cave or cave composition. And again, I was trying to see what does it look like on categories that wasn't really focused, to see does it improve the composition and so on. So even graphic design is actually a lot better than before the training. And I noticed what's fun to do now in Optic is actually, even if I'm doing cars, just taking a picture of something very graphical, like a poster or something, and using it as an inspiration that will then affect the composition of the generation of, let's say, the car. I think the added knowledge in other categories will help you generate more cool stuff in whatever specific category you want to focus on. So even cars, which got improved in this patch, are also helped with the fine-tuning of the rest of the categories. Another example, again, photography wasn't our focus, but just seeing what does the aesthetic look like, what does the composition look like. Now that after the fine-tuning, we try to generate. And so those are some of the examples. Now we can jump into the tool itself. So here we go. And as you might have noticed, the first thing that has changed in general, on the left here, now you have another slider called manual style blend. And this is the slider I was talking about before, where now you have control how conceptual to how like general product design or general design you want it to be. And this slider only exists for car exterior, car interior, because those are the two categories that have like special tune models. And now it actually gives you manual control. How far do you want to push that like conceptual part of the model? And I'll show some examples here. So if I start with just conceptual at full and run it like this. So here you go. And again, these are just text to image. I have only inference at full and shape control. So it doesn't see the image I start with. It's just relying on the prompt, just so I can show you the difference. And now this was that conceptual one. If we go to very low on the style blend slider now, so general, and I run it again, you can see the wheels are smaller. It's very much more traditional in the feature is trying to do. Proportions are much more normal because again, it's just like general product design and not conceptual automotive design. And this really depends like what you want to create, because sometimes you want those big proportions, big wheels, aggressive stance, but you might also be working on something that's very close to production or more classic, more vintage, and you want those smaller wheels, just more classic features. And now you have that control for cars. I can also do a generation where like we're somewhere in the middle. We start to get some of those like conceptual features, but it's not so all the way cranked up to one. And I'll run this as well. So now we're starting to see a bit more like cleaned up body side, like not these traditional V shapes on the body side or anything. And just overall, the aesthetic started to be a bit more conceptual. And so that's what this style blend slider does. Another nice thing we added And maybe I can show the product design example here. Actually, before we go there, let me just show you a few examples me generating actually with like product design examples. So you see more than just the like show real images that I showed at the beginning. So I have a quick prompt that I wrote 3x4. I copy paste. Here we go. We have a little triangular like cottage on the. Let's generate again just to get some variance. Oh, that's pretty cool. I think this example is pretty good because it shows both the general aesthetic, even if you're doing landscapes, but even some of the product design understanding, like how do you treat all of these like big man-made surfaces in a more design aesthetic way. I can also here demonstrate the improve refine, which it's not a big change, but we just made sure that when you do refine, actually the original image that it starts out with is higher quality. And it doesn't really affect details, but it affects those areas that are very flat and have very like subtle gradients and so on, because compression usually destroys that. But there's a slight improvement in the refine. Again, I don't think you'll be able to see it just by me refining this image. I'll just for fun refine this just so we see it in a big image. Now we have much more detail on the interior and stuff. So that's pretty cool. Let's do another example. So let's say let's do a chair. So I'll just write chair in a minimalistic room, orange color, sunshine. There we go. Simple as that. And I'll do 3:4 aspect ratio and let's generate. Here we go. We have something as a base. One additional feature I can show here is that obviously we have inspiration image already, but now you can actually add 2 inspiration images. So I'll take something graphical. So I take this poster as inspiration. I don't know what I will do with that, but just to see how it affects the generation. Then we can pick another one, and I'll pick, preferably it's the same subject as we had before. If you do poster and a coffee machine as inspiration, for example, then you most likely will get a coffee machine. Like the prompt and the inspiration will fight with each other. So I'll just take a chair as another inspiration image, one of the examples from earlier, and let's run it like that. We probably don't get it to be as orange anymore because we get different colors from the inspiration. And there we go. Now, like you can see how much more kind of creative potential you have since you can have 2 inspiration images. So taking this one and taking this one as the 2 inspiration images, you can see how the generation is now kind of combining all of the elements together. And obviously we said orange color, but it's fighting the 2 inspiration images. So that's something you should take into account, that you're like, it's not orange, but it might be because your inspiration image is telling it to be some other color. So yeah, that's something, just the general point, and like you have so much more creative potential now just adding another inspiration image. Again, we had inspiration images before already, but we realized actually, why don't we just do 2, and then you can mix and match kind of different vibes together. And here again, like just to give everyone a reminder, we have the edit tool. So in the inspiration image, it said March here, but I just like the graphical layout with kind of the boxy views, which we also see in the generation a little bit, and the text at the bottom. So we could say in edit mode, like actually I wanted to say April. So then I can say change the text to say April, and then we can generate or edit. Now, and we have the text saying April now. Maybe we want to bring the orange color back, so we could say make the image more orange, and again edit, and perfect. Now we have kind of all the elements that we wanted. We want the minimalistic chair, we want the orange, we want the sunlight to come in. Then we wanted more of that graphical layout, and that more soft type of chair, very minimalistic type of chair. And we combine them to that final image, we can even go refine. So we have like a nice high-res image to the end. Here we go. Now we have the nice big 4K image. Next up, let's do some more different categories. So one thing that also improved in this patch is bikes. And let's do an example of that. So the reason why bikes got improved is kind of twofold. We both improved the automotive side and vehicle design, but we also improved the product design aspect. And so both combined also obviously improved bicycles because it's kind of in between. There is some automotive stuff, some obviously it's vehicle design, but there are more like product design elements to a bike than like a car exterior. So I'll just show hopefully how much it has improved in this new update. So I'll just do a text prompt and I'll just copy paste a quick one, but a very simple futuristic electric motorcycle concept. So here we have something very futuristic. Like you can see it's not very conventional at all. But the nice thing is, well, obviously you can change the prompt to not say futuristic, but we could say like modern. But before I do that, I can also show we have the manual style blend also available for bikes. Obviously, if you go all the way to 1, it would be very automotive because that's what the conceptual training most is about. But for example, if you want to go more conservative, you could reduce the style blend to be closer to general here and then say, let's do modern rather than futuristic. So we get something less crazy. And let's run it again. Looks like it's still too futuristic. Let's add an inspiration to more show what I mean. And I'll just take a bike image like this. Again, one of the examples. I'll use that as inspiration to better guide what I need. Yeah, and let's just see what do we get like this. And let's run it again. So yeah, that's much more like it. The reason why I was thinking should I remove electric is because the inspiration I have is not electric, but in the prompt I say electric. But I mean, the aesthetic is cool enough. We don't really care about the platform right now. Just show you the improvement in the training. Again, like in the last example, if we use the inspiration that's white studio, bike should we say, well, the red studio, these elements will fight together. You just kind of have to see how it comes out. You can always go to edit here and change these studio to be red. And then let's run this. And so now we can have the studio in red. So that's something to, again, take into account to see how does your inspiration and your prompt differ. If there's something you can just bring with edit tool, you can just go to edit and describe what you want to change. But I'll just go back because I, again, want to try with 2 inspiration images to see what we get. So for the other inspiration image, I'll take something more as like a feature defining inspiration. So I take this watch and have that as the second inspiration. And I'm hoping that, let's say, these body elements are a bit more like kind of flat plane, maybe the screw holes on the edges and so on, and see if we can affect it. Again, here, Red Studio electric motorcycle probably won't come out in the output because of the inspiration, but it's close enough that we can just run it like this. Or it's irrelevant to the generation I'm doing. If obviously I would care it to either be electric or not electric, I would change the inspiration. But here I'm just exploring, so it is what it is. So then I'll just run it again. Shape controller is at 0, so it's essentially not seeing the original image and just generating based off the prompt and the inspiration. So now we can see it's kind of combining the watch feel of obviously the screw hole and the flat planes and the bicycle. So we get something in between. Again, something to consider. The inspiration, one of them is in a white studio and the other one is in Flex Studio. So you kind of just see how it comes out because it has to choose one or the other. Or it might be just like a shade of gray, which the ground in this case is. But it kind of combines the 2 ideas together. We could try with something else as an inspiration. let's do the graphical one again. I like those graphical poster stuff. So again, I'm using this March graphic. And let me just put those to shortcode 5 and let's generate. The upper part is pretty cool here. Again, we start to get these graphical elements and even like this mesh from the graphic. Let's go back and let's just bump this slider for it to be more conceptual. And let's run it again. So yeah, here we have another proposal. Actually, yeah, we don't have those, like, it doesn't say March anywhere. But I kind of like this theme that was influenced by the graphic. Here we had these interlocked straight lines. We start to get that feel here also. Maybe we can upscale this one. There we go. And now we have like nice shot lines and even the graphic pattern looks pretty cool. And different categories too. So I'll just do one last car design. Car design is slightly upgraded, but most importantly, because I like playing around with the two inspiration images, I'll do one more example with the car. And I'll use image to image as the base. So obviously we'll look at a prompt here, but I'll use a bit of shape control, just slightly, so hopefully gets the view. I want like aggressive front view. Let's just see what it does without any inspiration. I'll put model influence to full. Let's put conceptual all the way to full. That's okay-ish. Let's go back. I think we can make it a bit more general. Okay, yeah, that's better. So we see a little bit what we get without inspiration. For that, I'll reduce the model infrastructure to 8, but now we can add some images to affect the inspiration. And I'll start by adding this, because I think we can probably get some pretty cool, like flat silver grille on the front of the SUV. So I'll put that as inspiration and let's run again. Yeah, exactly. Like that's the kind of vibe I was going for. Anyway, yeah. Last thing I didn't mention, there's one update for lenses. Very small one. If you have a lens, also you have the slider, but at the very bottom you have this thing called override default style. And by default, and the default behavior that it's on, which means whatever lens you want to activate and the higher the influence, then the bigger the effect of your lens is, rather than like the specialized training of automotive we do for the default style of Optic. Because most of the time, if you train something, you want that to come out as much as possible. But there are some cases where you did a training specifically for a set of wheels or something, but you don't want to lose the specialized like aesthetic of automotive design that we have. And in that case, you will want to turn it off, because you want the generation to still keep the automotive aesthetic with, let's say, the new wheels you trained. You just have to pay attention with, if you turn it off, that you might get something very chaotic, because you're essentially putting a ton of stuff into the soup and hoping that it tastes good. So if you have, let's say, wheels, it makes sometimes sense to turn it off, because it's such a small thing of what you're generating. But if you're doing a whole new car or sketch style or something, if you crank it all the way to 1, maybe the generation is not what you hope for, because again, you're adding a lot of stuff on top of it and hoping that it will be correct. So default is on. You can try the setting off to see if it improves. Let's say there's some very small subset of training. That's what the slider is there for. I could try here. I'll need to remove that prompt because we don't want the off-road car. And remove the inspiration. I'll just say best car in New York City. And I'll just do 2 generations, one with it on and one with it off. Shape control to 0. Let's generate. So that's with it on. And now if I turn it off. So in this case, for example, you can see there starts to be some nasty stuff, because again, it's just too much influence. You can also try, if you do it off, you can put that to like 0.7. If you still really want to override the default style, again, on is by default because that makes the best results. But if you really want to have it off and you want to try to get the quality to be up, you can reduce the lens strength a little bit just to compensate. And now we have something more coherent, but again, because we have it off, we have both the kind of specialized training on top and then your lens. And so you kind of a blend of the two. But if you really need to keep it to reduce the chaos, you can reduce the user lens a little bit to compensate a little bit and make the equation for the model a bit easier. But yeah, that's the latest Optic update. I think there's some pretty cool stuff coming out. Again, for all design, we started with car design specifically and exterior because we know we can be the most picky at it. And so if we can get the process down to exactly what we would be satisfied with, then we know if we know we can do this with car exteriors, then we can replicate that in car interiors, product design, and have the same kind of results, even if we don't have the same sort of design eye for those industries. But because we know the process works in car exterior, then we know we should be able to do that with other design areas as well. And so, yeah, look out for those updates and I'll see you guys next time.